Hello and welcome to the Open Era podcast. My name is Devang Desai, and once again, Simon and I are off this week. Simon is actually in Ontario, but a bit north where there is actually snow. So yeah, shudder at the thought. But this week we will replay one of our lookbacks. This was on Jennifer Capriati, someone whose story I think maybe isn't as told as often as it should be when we talk about the greats of the game, or your Grafs, Navratilovas, Seleses, Serenas, Venuses, Hingis. I think Jennifer Capriati has a pretty exceptional story and a big imprint on tennis, American tennis, and I think some of the things we see today with how athletes are acting both on and off the court. So hope you enjoy this open era look back. Jennifer Capriati, tennis survivor. We'll talk to you next week. Hello and welcome to the Open Air Podcast. My name is Devang Desai and I'm joined, as always, by Mr. Simon Bushell. We talked about Coco Gauff, Bush, and the idea that she is on the next level, a teenager herself who is being talked about in very high praise and high terms, very young in her career. So it was fitting probably to look back at someone who went through this, someone who really did live the American dream for all of its highs and lows, as Jennifer Capriati.
A person that we honestly have not spoken about a great deal on this podcast, and someone who I think deserved an episode in her own right, just given that she is a 3-time Grand Slam champion. She is a Hall of Famer. And really, the story is incredible. And as I was talking to my girlfriend yesterday about what Jennifer Capriati's history is, she was a little bit astonished about some of the things that I was saying to her. And it's not often that you get the chance to really startle someone who watches a fair amount of sport when you say to them, you know how good Coco Gauff is and you know how good Rafael Nadal is? Well, take 3 years off of their age and then you can imagine how good Jennifer Capriati was at an early age. We're talking about someone who is in the top 10 in the world at 14. And when we say that's never going to happen again, probably is never going to happen again. 14 is just, it boggles the mind.
Pretty safe to say that for sure, Bush. Capriati was basically called the brunette Chris Everett, who also burst onto the scene as a 13-year-old to stun the tennis world. Capriati was following in those same footsteps in 1990 when she made the top 10, and she was beating players well older than her with a game that belied her age, Bush. I think she was not only obviously having all the strokes, but tactically I thought she played extremely well. And you're like, wait a minute, this person is 13. How is this possible?
It's incredible, isn't it? And if you watch some of the footage back from when she's really young, it is amazing that tennis acumen and the knowledge just of being on court. Oftentimes you hear about players who can sort of gain that over the years, that it's a lot of repetition and it's putting yourself in situations and reading body language of your opposition to know where the shots are going to go. And I think a lot of the top players, the big three actually have spoken about this in interviews a lot of the time, which is just that you get to learn the patterns and the habits of the players that you're playing against so consistently. And you sort of understand what shots they go to and what their fallback plan is. And it makes their tennis IQ look a little bit higher than they get credit for because, you know, in some capacity, once you've played someone so many times, you sort of get a feel of how they play. But in Capriati's case, she's never played any of these people before. And she is literally 12 and 13 years old. And she's reading the game so well. And I think that's the most astonishing part about her, just the overall feel for the game to go along with the outright raw power. And so much during this period of time, we've spoken to eras crossing, and Monica Seles is a really good example of that. It is no surprise that Jennifer Capriati and Monica Seles are spoken of in the same breath because they both did transform the game in terms of powerful hitting, flat strokes, and just being phenoms at such early ages.
Talk about the 1990 semifinal she had with Monica Seles at the US Open, a classic match, a match between two very young players who were on course to basically redefine the women's game, Bush. I think it's safe to say, even though Capriati lost that match, she played a part in kind of ushering in a new era for the women's game.
And it's impossible to not look at that 1990 US Open semi-final and not see the implications and the ramifications on the match that we're talking about in 2003. the US Open meant a hell of a lot to Jennifer Capriati and the Capriati family, not least to Stefanos Capriati, someone we'll be talking about momentarily, who I'm sure we'll have a few choice things to say about, but incredibly important that particular tournament. And given the road that Jennifer goes down over the next decade, before we get to that match in 2003 against Justine Henin, the one in 1990, there's a lot of eerie similarities in terms of how the matches play out. And there are similarities in terms of how it unfolds in terms of the end result, and also just how it unfolds in terms of how the points come out and how close Capriati is to victory in it. And I think it badly affected her. There's a couple of documentaries that I watched talking about Capriati's history. And this one in 1990 seemed to have badly affected her mentally for the rest of the next few years that followed it.
She does go on to become the youngest player to compete at Wimbledon, and then probably the biggest achievement of her young career is beating Steffi Graf in the gold medal match at the Barcelona Olympics in 92. Cap is 16, but she wins the gold. At this same time, she's the youngest player, to surpass $1 million in prize money. Martina Hingis would break this later, a few years later, and she had her own video game. Like, she is the peak American it girl. In terms of researching this episode and looking back, Bush, we watched that ESPN documentary, and it's like all of the US media that we see today that is really focused on Coco Gauff, and we see such hallmarks of that in the way Capriati was covered back then, to the point where you could tell like Capriati did not like a lot about what her life was like. Like, she was doing tennis all the time, could not hang out with her friends, very isolated. And her dad, Stefano Capriati, a huge factor in her life. And I think it's hard to say that it was a positive one. Even though she was a phenomenal tennis player, I think he comes off from the outside as a terrible influence on his daughter.
And someone who has maybe one of the most chilling quotes that I've heard about his own daughter / child in this case, quote, "Look, I love my daughter more than you know, but where I come from, we have a proverb. When the apple is ripe, eat it. Jennifer is ripe. If she burns out, only God can know. Not you or me, but when and if that happens, she'll have more money than I could ever give to her." And nowhere in there is, I hope she's okay. Nowhere within that quote is, I want to make sure that she's completely and utterly fine. It's dollar signs, it's money, and it's product.
I mean, if he threw that in there, it'd be more disingenuous than we would ever believe. I mean, in one way, I'm kind of like, you know what? Thanks for just being straight up about this, man. Like, it's sickening, but I mean, it's good to know. It's good to know. But that was the mindset for him. And also, I feel like the tennis media at the time, I think, if you're talking about like print and like magazine coverage and US media coverage and CBS being everywhere, like this might be the peak in terms of saturation for like every move Capriati is making is being followed, which culminates in with the way it's described, a shocking shoplifting arrest for a $15 trinket. And it's made to believe like this is Watergate. This is a massive deal because she started wearing black, and Bud Collins in this documentary watched is stunned by this and saying there's a sign, and she's rebelling and hanging out with negative people. And it's like, well, she's a teenager. Like, these are things that you do. But I think in the tennis world, it is the idea that she was rebelling was like such a mind-blowing idea. This all culminates with this shoplifting arrest, which really kind of just stops everything in its tracks, Bush.
Devang, it is a good job that Bud Collins never saw me in my Chemical Romance era of us growing up.
Right?
There was probably some choice things he would have said about me.
Eyeliner banned. He had a fear of eyeliner. It's true, just a phobia that was never really explained, but definitely shaded parts of his life. I mean, the reaction is, it's funny. We talk about this all the time, like the monocle wearing set in tennis and how they're so freaked out by someone being slightly different. But like in this case, like she is literally a teenager living her life when she's unable to and acting out in the only way she can, really. But I mean, you're seeing it play out in front of everyone as well. So everything is hyperanalyzed and we have conclusions being drawn. But I don't think it's unfair to say, I don't think Jennifer Capriati really liked tennis that much at this point.
No, and that famous Andre Agassi line about "I hate tennis" seems pretty poignant here as well, doesn't it, with Jennifer Capriati? I think it's impossible to not look at the period of time that this occurs in. This is pre-social media, this is pre-internet, this is pre sort of a devolution of media in some capacity. So all eyeballs are focused on the thing that who is ever in charge of the media wants it to be focused on. And at this point in late 80s, early 90s, it is full on corporate capitalism, like to its extreme. And Jennifer Capriati is simply a vehicle to push that. And it's very much the case. You mentioned how much money she earned in endorsements. She's basically a product at this point, and she is not herself in any capacity. Right. It is whoever her sponsorship and whoever her father want her to be, that is what she is at this period of time. And looking back at it, I was all ready to, because when you're growing up and you hear about players, I didn't know a huge amount about Jennifer Capriati, I had to say. And doing the research for this episode, you go back and you sort of look at your own life experiences and you look at how the world has unfolded over the last couple of decades. I feel so sorry for her. I feel incredibly bad. And, that's not to excuse some of the things that she's done in her life, because I think she's done some rubbish things as well. But let's put this in a different perspective for everyone out there. I want you to imagine a member of your family or someone that you know, like a niece or a nephew or a friend of a family who is currently 14 years old. Okay, I want you to picture them in your head. And then imagine that 14-year-old has $5 million and is a top 10 greatest athlete in the world at that period of time. Do you think that 14-year-old could handle it? I don't think they could. I really don't. And I'm going out on a limb here of saying I think that's probably true about most people.
I think, and the product of its time, she got booked for possession of marijuana, which then was is she doing heroin? And the war on drugs idea of marijuana, my God, which adds to the hysteria. There's all kinds of fat shaming going on about her body, and which led to a lifelong eating disorder that she battled with throughout. People were very, very unkind to Jennifer Capriati, and it has to be said again and again. This is not. It's sad because this is not a unique thing. And it's funny. I think we were watching this documentary that must have been made before the Tiger Woods stuff all happened with his infidelity, because they were mentioning Tiger as someone who went to university, worked out as a child star. He turned out okay in the end. I'm well, I mean, clearly not. And not to say that's horrendously bad what he did. I think everything was so out of whack in terms of what we deemed acceptable behavior and what was okay and was not okay. But it drove Capriati away from the game. She takes a break. But then a couple of years later, she begins her way to try to dig herself back into this. And I thought was super interesting. She apologized to the media at the US Open when she returned, basically being hey, I'm sorry I acted the way I acted. I acted pretty poor to you, the media. I wasn't in the right spot. I was rebelling. I was acting out. I don't want to talk about this anymore. I'm done with this. Let's move forward. And the media refused to do that. And I don't really blame them in that sense, but they were waiting for something to drop and kind of a mea culpa. But I don't think she had to offer that to anyone, really.
No, I don't think so either. I think she has one of the more fascinating Grand Slam singles timelines. I think both of us are big fans of going and look at the Wikipedia, seeing all that big block. And I think it's one of most tennis fans' favorite things to do, which is to go and look at how Grand Slam results and just you get all the different color coordinations of how they line up. She has one of the most amazing ones out of any tennis player I've seen, because you get a 13-year-old from 1990 to 1993 who basically quarterfinal, semifinal, so an incredibly good player. And then you just have a 6-year absence of just either nothing and not playing or first round losses. And it's kind of amazing. Right. And then you kind of get the later stage of her career and you're if in 2001 when she wins a Grand Slam, this must be a 21-year-old coming up and, fully realizing her potential and everything. No, she's 28 and this is just her finally getting wild to the point that she wants to play tennis. And it's really, really incredible. Dev, can we just quickly touch on Tracy Austin? Because I think there's some really interesting parallels here as well, right? Because a lot of the rules that govern about how players can play on the WTA and ATP side in terms of how they're limited to play certain matches, Tracy Austin broke a lot of that stuff, right? And there's a reason that Capriati was able to play at Wimbledon and become the youngest ever to do that. And I think they touch upon it a little bit in the documentary of how much the WTA were at fault in terms of the things that happened to Capriati in terms of her love of the game being taken away from her. So Number one, above everything else, I would put money as a thing that probably did this to her and greed.
Ding, 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 ding.
I would say above everything else. That's
sorry, Bush. I can't hear you. I can't hear you, Bush. I can't hear you, Bush. The coins are flowing around me. Ding, ding, ding. Yeah.
Of reasons why this happened. But I think up there as well, and I'd certainly put her father up there as well as another reason for that. But I do think the WTA has a little bit of blame to take in this as well, because obviously the way that Tracy Austin unfolded, she won a Grand Slam very early, I believe at 16 years of age. She pushed very hard, and her family pushed very hard to have the rules changed so that she could play every single tournament. Capriati's father, again, is quoted as saying that he will sue the WTA if his daughter is not allowed to play in some of these events. And we see that eventually change at the back end of this. And it's a reason that the ramifications still come out of here, because Coco Gauff is suffering the effects of this, being someone who's clearly good enough to play multiple tournaments. But in a lot of ways, regulation's kind of important, is it not, Dev? Is that the kind of the crux of what I'm getting to here? Maybe it is a good thing that some of these players are not able to play so much when they're 16 years of age.
Protecting them from these overzealous parents or sponsors, right? Yeah. Perhaps you're onto something there, Bush. I don't know.
Well, maybe, yes. Also, just think about it. If you're top 10 in the world at 16 years of age, you're going to be top 10 in the world at 21 years of age, right? Like, barring some incredible change in life circumstances, I don't know. It seems like you might just want to let your daughter or son just be a child for a little bit longer. Like, if they're that good that early, maybe they can just, it's not going anywhere. Their talent's not going anywhere.
And I think like the family situation of a lot of these prodigies really impacted how they ended up in terms of like being okay or having a okay relationship with the game, because I feel financial reasons drive a lot of these decisions, as we've seen. And I don't necessarily blame the parents for wanting, quote unquote, a better life for their kids, even though it means like driving said kid into the ground. Like, it's like, well, who are you doing this for then, is another question I think should be asked. But we gotta get to a break. But I think we just queue up Bush. She comes back, but like, it's not like she comes back and does crazy well, like you mentioned. Like, she is in the tennis wilderness for a good couple of years, till about, I guess you could say 2000.
Yeah, basically from 96 when she comes back to 2000, nothing really happens for her. The best she sort of does is a fourth round run at the US Open in 1999. I would say one of the biggest things for her, at least the way that she talks about it within the documentary, is getting into physical shape that she really wanted to be in. And you touched on a lot of the fat shaming, a lot of the body shaming stuff that happened that was right in the 90s. And it's not gone away in a lot of ways. It's still there. But this is someone who was brought up to basically hate her body, which is so horrible and disgusting to think about, that you force someone to just consistently not like themselves when they look at themselves in the mirror. And this is her words of what she has had to say about it. But it wasn't until 2000 that she fully took that to, I would say, extreme lengths in a lot of ways. If you look at her in 2000 in the Australian Open semifinal, she is a physical specimen at that point. This is someone who has worked so incredibly hard to look and be in such peak physical shape that I think it really does. It certainly helps her tennis. And maybe some part of that helped her as well mentally. Maybe she needed that part of it as well. But there's no denying that when she gets to that point, it turns her tennis to another level. And it's unsurprising when she wins her first Grand Slam in 2001.
We'll talk about that. We'll talk about the 2003 semifinal with Justine Henin right after the break. Welcome back to the Open Era podcast. Jennifer Capriati, tennis prodigy, tennis survivor. She's back in the game, but not doing well till around 2000. She makes the semifinal at the Australian Open, but 2001 is really the year where it all comes together. She's the 12th seed at the 2001 Australian Open. She gets Monica Seles. She then defeats number 1 seed Martina Hingis in straight sets to win her very first Grand Slam title. She was the lowest seed ever to win the title at that time, and the first player since Tracy Austin in 79 to defeat 2 top-ranked players in straight sets at a major. It's a massive result. And what does she do, Bush? She wins the French Open right after that. And who does she beat in that one? It's a formidable foe there. It's Kim Clijsters. Like, that was a match in itself. That 2001 French final against Kim was epic. That was good.
Really was. 2001, incredible year for Capriati. Double major winner, 2 semifinals. You would argue that she probably should have won that Wimbledon as well if she's not stopped by Justine Henin, who we'll come onto in a second as well. It's a pretty amazing year for her. The culmination and the peak, you would argue, of where she got professionally. What a cathartic feeling it must have been for Capriati herself in 2001 to win that first Grand Slam, because you have all of this history and all of this weight put upon her. Let's not forget that she turned pro in 1990. So 11 years later, before you win your first Grand Slam, you're in your first slam semi-final in 1990. It's amazing. In May 1990, before you win your first slam. It's incredible.
I found something super poetic about the fact that she had to face and beat Monica Seles in this tournament as well to get her first. Like a true calf on as much as there could be. I mean, who knows how you can get rid of that emotional baggage, but to be able to take out Seles in that fashion, that has to be massive for her.
Incredibly important to her, I think, to beat Seles, and also. It's funny that she plays Martina Hingis in the final as well, right? Another player who very, very early on in her career was 15, I believe, when she won her first Grand Slam. It's funny that during this period of time when you have all of these young stars, Seles, Hingis, and Capriati, all very flat hitters, all absolute monsters in terms of being able to strike the ball from the back of the court. It is a changing of the guard in terms of how the sport is being played. And then, of course, we have the Williams sisters who come just after this. But really, it's those improvements in racket technology. It's the strings changing, and it's very, very hard flat hitting from the baseline. And Capriati really was the culmination of that in a lot of ways. And she was one of those transitory players who took it into a new generation as well.
I think there's something super cool about the fact that she played Martina Navratilova, Steffi Graf, Venus Williams, Serena Williams, Martina Hingis. Like it's incredible to be able to say that. She gets 2 slams. She's flying. She makes 2 semifinals. 2001, truly a remarkable year for Jennifer Capriati. 2002, it's major number 3, and it's another big win. It's against Hingis again. Like, she's not fluking her way, pardon the term. I don't like it very much, but she's not like scamming her way to wins here. She's beating the best of the best, and that's Hingis again in Melbourne.
And I think she shows why she was the child prodigy, is that she hasn't lost any of the ability that she had in the early 90s. She still reads the game incredibly well. She's still very athletic and quick around the court, and she still hits ferociously with all of them. That talent never went away. She's always been a top 10 player, even throughout her career. It's just whether or not she was going to be able to take that final step and cross the line to win Grand Slams. And I think that's the thing that was so sort of eye-opening about watching the documentary and about her and just seeing where she was ranked in the early 90s and when she was a very young teenager, is because, yeah, she was a top 10 player, and there's the expectation placed upon her that she's going to go on and win a Grand Slam. But maybe she is just a top 10 player. Like, maybe that is maybe she peaks at being someone who is just good enough to hang around and make the latter stages of tournaments. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But to take that and kick it on, to win 3 Grand Slams and become world number 1 of what she did, that takes something a little extra special. And it's really quite incredible what she managed to achieve, given all of the baggage and all of the weight that came on her from the past decade.
She came back. She did what people believe she could do as a kid. But the one thing that eluded her, the one title that eluded her, was in New York, and it was the US Open. She had come close. We mentioned that loss to Seles when she was really young, that really faced her and possibly set her off course. But she had made the semifinal in 2001, as we mentioned, did not make it to the final. But 2003, there's a chance. Serena Williams, defending champion, is not participating due to injury. Venus also withdrew before the tournament began due to injury. Really opening it up, Bush. Like, you're talking at this time now, it's Justine Henin, it's Lindsay Davenport, it's probably Emily Mauresmo and Kim Clijsters. Like, these are probably the biggest players in the mix at this point.
Definitely, and still very, very young Justine Henin as well, and then just won the French Open earlier that year. So she's just fresh off winning a Grand Slam for the first time. I don't think anyone really had anticipated that she would go on and dominate the women's game in the way that she did. I guess actually that's arguable, isn't it, about whether she did dominate the game. I would say that she did, but then again, I'm a massive fanboy, so...
I like to suggest a massive conspiracy that the reason we're doing a Jennifer Capriati episode is so that you can talk about Justine Henin in this one, because she's in this match. I see the game. You're not fooling anyone, man. I see the long con.
We could have talked about the semi-final and her against Seles, couldn't we? But instead, we chose the one against Henin. It is suspicious in some ways. We already did a Seles episode. Come on. Give me a break.
I know. This also, I think, was peak Fila. Like, if we're talking about Fila, the brand, this is the apex they reached in 2003, because Capriati's wearing like a July the 4th All-America Star Spangled Banner outfit. She's ready to rep America. It really made me think about a suggestion. You're talking about moving the U.S. Open away from New York permanently, correct?
Me, yeah, absolutely. I'm also talking about putting it on blue clay, but that's a different story in its entirety.
Seeing Cap's dress and the All-America crowd boorish behavior once again on display in this match, they should move it to that Berlin airport hangar where they've had those exhibition matches. I think it would be a good setting for it.
So Capriati's outfit here, my thoughts on this are... You know when?
The outfit is screaming to me. You know what it's screaming to me? It's, where are you from? That's what the outfit is screaming to me. When someone asks, where are you really from? That is what that has. It's saying, where are you really from? Is what that outfit is screaming to me.
Definitely. I was going to say, you know when something is so tacky, like so tacky. You're like... You know what? I kind of like it. I'm kind of into it. I think that might be, when people are wearing like America bandanas and you're just thinking.
Yeah, no, I get it.
It takes some guts to pull that one off. I think it's probably the same way with this outfit.
It's like, maybe that guy really is a badass with that bandana. Maybe he is.
It takes a lot of guts to do that though. I appreciate the outfit, I have to say. By the third set, a more modest red dress, which I think is probably fine. By the way, just touching on the outfits, when you think about Justine Henin, does she wear anything other than what she does in this match? Like through her entire career, I just picture her in that Adidas skirt and athletic shirt and the baseball cap. Just that's it. That's all I ever see of her. Which there's something to be said about it. It's like saying the Sampras, same thing with the white polo shirt, and that's it. That's all he ever wore.
Adidas must have had a real easy time figuring out her order. Like it's like, yeah, okay, Justine needs, we know what to send. We know the stock order to send her. We know what she needs. Classic look. It's classic Henin to start. Boy, I mean, we said it infinite times on this podcast, but an absolute treat to watch Justine Henin at full flight. It's the backhand, but it's, man, Bush at the net. She hits volleys during this match that really have your jaw agape.
She's incredible. Well, I mean, what is left to be said about her? I've said it on this podcast previously, I'm still sad that her body broke down so many times. And believe me, we will come onto her body breaking down. In fact, both of these players, their body leaves them somewhat. I'm sorry, they're not with us tonight. This is what their body is saying at the end of this match. It should be noted before this, and the reason that we chose the semi-final in 2003, this is one of the all-time best women's matches. In fact, it's one of the all-time best tennis matches, regardless of gender, regardless of where it is in the world, juniors, seniors, wheelchair, doubles, anything. This is incredible. The quality is amazing. The drama in it is incredible. And one thing to note before we start, Justine Henin is wearing a wristwatch. A gold watch, an analog gold watch. Have you ever seen this?
She started a trend. I could have sworn I never saw people wearing watches until after this. I feel like this was maybe one of the first watch during a match moments, possibly. We'll have to get our research department to confirm. I want to know. I want to know if it's past midnight. Is it the night of the Friday or is it Saturday morning now, which would come into play? That's key information. I don't know. I feel like its style is, hey, you basically implied Justine had no style, but I think the watch was pretty stylish.
I don't understand it, but having said that, maybe I'll do it myself. I'm going to chuck on a wristwatch the next time I go out for a hit, and maybe it'll make me play better.
Probably not, but it definitely helped out Justine if you consider how well she played at the beginning. She's up 4-1, but Jennifer Capriati, maybe the story of her career. She answered back very strongly, using the crowd as well. I think obviously the crowd, she's an American. They're pulling for her, the American story of built up, beaten down, built up again in full effect. But both players are playing really well. And I don't think you're overstating it, Bush, when you say this is one of the best matches of all time, because even on the rewatch, I marveled at the power with both players are using. I think the power game at this point in 2003 is like, it's massive hitting. The sound the ball is making when it's connecting on the rackets is echoing in Arthur Ashe.
It really is, yeah. And contrast in styles, contrast in strings as well. You can hear the difference in terms of how the ball comes off the strings from Justine Henin with that full natural gut that she has in the racket versus the polyester strings. Great racket choice here from Jennifer Capriati. The all black, the classic prints. It's a great look. I had one of these Justine Henin hammers as well. The orange and black one that she's using in this match. I had one of these when I was younger, so I had some nostalgic feelings for that racket as well. But yeah, the sound the ball makes when these two are hitting. And it's not like either of them have a bad shot in their arsenal. You could argue that both are a little bit weaker on serve, but I thought they both served fantastically in this match. And both wings, forehand and backhand, they are just crushing the ball from the back of the court.
Capriati was down 4-1, but she managed to turn it around, stunning Henin for sure. But I think the crowd, who is now fully buying in, it's a massive comeback in the first set by Cap, and she takes that first set 6-4.
Settle down, everybody. Oh dear. That is, to me, not good. Let's have some sportsmanship here. And it's got to Henin. Capriati has taken, unbelievably, a magnificent first set, 6-4, having trailed 4-1.
Bush, you mentioned, you gotta come collect your boy, the commentator, who I'm assuming is English, because he did not like Jennifer Capriati at all.
Wow, this is appalling commentary. Do yourself a favor if you want a textbook example of how not to cover a match. This is dreadful. Also, I don't know if I want to rag on someone for the accent they have or anything, because they're born with it and, you can't really control it. But this guy is a very unfortunate sound. He sounds like he's like a tax credit person or someone who, you ring up and they're on the other end of the IRA or something. Well, it's not great, is it? Anyway, that's by and by. Okay, I apologize to him. I don't mean to offend him. But I don't want to offend the accent, but what I will offend about him, his commentary is so biased. Like, so biased, it's ridiculous. Like, this dude loves Justine Henin, and we all love Justine Henin, but he is talking some serious smack about Jennifer Capriati, calling her weak mentally during this match. It is over the line, and quite frankly, it's terrible. Also, have some emotion in your voice. This is one of the greatest matches of all time, and he sounds like he's commentating on someone's grass grower.
Yeah, it sounds like someone pushed him slightly on the bus to get by, and he's befuddled by that. That's like the reaction level of his voice. He's like, well, okay then, Jennifer Cap, okay, all right. He's offended, but no one else is. And you can hear at the beginning that he mentions the boos. So like the crowd is booing, legit booing first serve misses, missed shots by Henin. There's no illusions here. There's no illusions of a proper
let's keep
crowd.
In mind,
one
of the players in this match is literally wearing an American flag. What do you think was going to happen?
I know. I don't blame people for the nationalism oozing out of them uncontrollably. Like they have no means of containing it. But that's the atmosphere we're at. And Capriati's riding that extremely well because she starts the second set off with the same level, the same energy. She rides out to a big lead. She's up basically in the driver's seat, Bush, and now she's going to serve for the match.
She is, and she's really not very far away from winning this match. They mention it on commentary, and it is true about this match. She is 2 points away from winning the match, I believe 11 times during this whole thing. So to say that she is within touching distance of, it's incredible, right? And they end up winning the same amount of points. Just to give you an impression of how close this match is, Capriati should win this match. There's no denying it. And there's a reason I'm sure this match sticks with her and people remember it both fondly and incredibly negatively, is it really was that close. And for all the fighting spirit that Capriati has to come back in the first set, massive shout outs to Henin being able to survive this as well, because she's down. She has to weather a storm here, and she plays some really, really great tennis to get herself back into the second set.
The 2 points at 30-30 in the 5-3 game with Capriati serving, I had to rewind, as they say, several times. There's 30-30 point. Henin hits a drop shot half volley at full stretch that is so casual, so murderously lethal. in how well it's executed. Ho-hum, point one. Breakpoint opportunity. Both players trade ridiculous lobs. Henin just has one extra shot in her. Capriati hits it long. We're back on serve. It was a brilliant series of points. That was seriously just another drop, a segment in a match full of them. There was moments like that you really had to appreciate how well both players played, Bush, because the level really didn't drop.
I also think it's one of those things that doesn't get spoken about for Jennifer Capriati. Like, we always talk about the big power game and everything. She volleyed really well in this match. She recognized the moments to come in, sensed when there was a bit of weakness from the back of the court, and moved in and volleyed pretty well during this match. And I think there's actually a pretty good amount of variety in this match as well. You know you're going to get that with Justine Henin. Like, she has excellent feel on the ball. Lots of drop shots in this match, which is always fun. But they both played super, super aggressive and moved in whenever they wanted to, which is great and something that we want to see more of, I think. And I think this is a period in time where that was rewarded on a US Open court as well.
From down 3-5, she wins 4 consecutive games. It's Justine Henin taking the second set 7-5. The commentators feeling a lot better. It's all even on Arthur Ashe.
3 set points from nowhere for Henin Arden. Are the walls, not of Babylon, but of Capriati tumbling down here. It's going to be 1 set all, as we expected. And she wins that service game. That's the easiest service game, and Capriati just lost all the fire and all the adrenaline in that game. 1 set all, we're into a final set. It's going to be a cracking set.
Man, I mean, it really sets the scene for what we get into in the third set. But the walls of Capriati, I guess, did kind of come down. It's a pretty big miss point. And for someone who struggled so much at this stage in the US Open before, I think it's impossible to overlook the symbolism of being unable to close it out in the second set. And I think Bush, our notes, I was blown away by the description here. But the third set, I mean, we have a tiebreak that sorts it all out. But I thought the play within the third set up till the tiebreak, it was a fitting cap for a really good match, because I think it had everything that made this match special combined into a dense period of time where you saw the best and the worst from both players.
Yeah, you do. Also, it should be noted, the length of time that these rallies are taking, there's some punishing rallies from the back of the court in terms of their ball striking, just the sound you were talking about of what it is from the back of the court when it strikes the strings. But these are grueling, long, testing rallies, and the first set is extraordinarily long. The second set is long as well. So both of these players are dog tired coming into this third set. And the third set's also for I would say the second set is the highest in terms of overall quality, in terms of shot making and power. But the third set is drama filled for a different reason, that both of these are just so tired that they're barely getting to balls at time. But still, the level is still pretty damn high.
Capriati manages to recover from that slip in the second set, taking what would seem to be an insurmountable lead at 5-2 to serve it out again for the match. But once again, it's Henin is barely walking out there, and yet she's managing better serves, better service returns. She's now using everything she's got in her arsenal to fight her way back again. Like what she said, 11 times she was 2 points away from the match, Capriati. She had so many chances. I mean, to add to how hard this was for her to accept, she really, really should have finished this off before the tiebreak. It has to be said.
And I was ragging on her when we were watching the tiebreak recently, the pair of us, and saying, like, what was she thinking and mentally where she was going. When you're 11 points, so when you're 2 points away 11 times, it's not like she tried different things. She was more aggressive and that failed. She was more conservative and that failed. So where do you go? She went in the middle and that failed. So it's hardly surprising, right? Like, she's a little bit bewildered that her opponent just isn't going away. And I think she found the most success in this match, and she got the leads that she did when she was really, really aggressive. So it isn't any surprise going into crunch points and moments in this match that she decides to take it on and be the aggressor in the rallies. It is the fine margins, though. And when you do get a little bit tight and the balls sail on you, that's when your primary weapon goes away from you. And I think when she was so close to victory on those points, the aggressiveness kind of came back and bit her in the proverbial backside, right? Because your greatest weapon is your greatest weakness at that point.
She had a big lead, but it slipped away in the third set. Henin fought all the way back, and the momentum firmly on her side. I think for momentum aside, but physically, Capriati's also struggling a lot, and it's these rallies are aggressive. They're long. It catches up to you. We get to the tiebreak, but it really feels like the crowd sensed it, as in no matter what happens in the tiebreak, we should applaud these two for what they've done. And to see a standing ovation before the tiebreak, Bush, I thought that was fitting from a crowd we usually rag on. They got it right.
They did. Henin is all kinds of in trouble here. She can barely walk. She's cramping badly in her left leg. There's a few times after a first serve in the previous game to get us to the tiebreak that she's just down on basically on all fours, just trying to desperately get to the service line. And I think there's some really funny shots of her after this where she's just trying to stretch out and she's just smiling over at her box, and she's just basically sort of saying, how on earth am I in this? How am I still here? Because I don't deserve to be here. If I could just hang around. There's a really funny moment where she, after cramping and after just really suffering, she steps up to the line and bangs down 110 mile an hour first serve. You're like, where did this come from? This is incredible. Just nutso into this match. Just both players just out on the haunches and just barely able to walk, and yet still producing. The tiebreak itself, Dev, I feel really bad for Capriati because I think she's a bit all over the place mentally, and I don't know whether or not she knows what to do at this stage. Anna knows what she's doing, right? She's coming out swinging no matter what. But I think Capriati tries to respond to that and go big, and she misses some really simple balls here.
I think from losing the first point onward, she was done. Like, it looked like she was broken mentally when she lost the first point in the tiebreak, and it showed. Justine Henin comes out victorious 7-4 to win an absolutely fantastic match, 4-6, 7-5, 7-6 in front of a appreciative Arthur Ashe crowd.
It's all over now. It's Henin in the final. She's down, but she's not out because she's won. She's won the most extraordinary match. She's beaten Jennifer Capriati. A brisk handshake from a very disappointed player. 4-6, 7-5, and then in the tiebreaker, 7 points to 4 in one of the, if not the best ever women's match I've certainly ever seen.
She's down, but she's not out because she's won. And with those iconic words, we'll come back after the break to talk about what happened after the match. Welcome back to the Open Air Podcast. Post-match, Bush, you said Henin was done. Henin had to skip all of the post-match stuff because she needed an IV immediately. Super dehydrated, which left Cap to basically face the media after it had to be the toughest loss of her career.
Oh boy. You know it's bad when the player who wins the match ends up in hospital at the end of it. Probably not a good sign.
Never good.
Not a great situation. No. I feel really bad. And we're talking about Capriati specifically in this episode. You think of all the weight that gets placed upon her and through her whole career. And we didn't touch upon it in the match. And we talked about how mentally it was challenging for her in those points to be so close and to getting over the hurdle and just to be 2 points away 11 times and to be in the tiebreak and have a chance to get into your final. And then you think back to everything that's happened in her career about how desperately she wanted to win this US Open, the pressure that was put on her by her father, all of the remnants of what happened in that match against Monica Seles as well, about how much it badly affected her in the early part of her career. And you can consider why sometimes it would be challenging for someone to focus their energy and their sort of mental focus on the particular points that are necessary to win a match. I just feel so bad for her. I just feel so awful rewatching it to know that she is never going to win this title. And this probably is the closest she gets during her whole career. And there's something very, very sad about that.
She returned to the semis the following year, but lost to Elena Dementieva in 3 sets again. Another tiebreak to lose that one. Truly a cursed major for Cap, even though she made deep runs. Justine Henin ends up winning the 2003 US Open, beating countryman Kim Clijsters. We talked about that rivalry. Justine Henin, an absolutely ridiculous 2003 season. Phenomenal career, 7-time Grand Slam champion. Would win again in New York in 2007. But Bush, we talked about Cap post this match, post 2004. She has shoulder injury. And then her personal life, I think, again, takes a bit of a tumble. It's all these years catching up, all of these contributing factors, her dad and the career and her mental health kind of combining to make it really tough for her in these later stages.
Yeah, and the shoulder injury sort of putting paid to her career. And I think there is a little bit of an example of what happens to a lot of athletes when they retire or prematurely their injuries they cut short their careers and they're just so lost about what to do. And we see examples of it all the time of players who just do not know how to handle it. And I think this is an example of that as well, is that a player who just couldn't get over the idea that she wasn't a professional athlete anymore. She didn't really have anything else going on in her life. And when you've dedicated so much of your time to doing this thing, and you've been doing it since you were literally 2 months old or whatever it was when Stefanos Capriati hangs the tennis ball over her crib, you can only imagine when you're 28 and someone tells you, right, that's it, no more, you're not playing anymore. What must go through your head? And I think she took a long time to really come to terms with that. She's quoted as saying, "I couldn't believe the doctors could never fix my shoulder. I just can't believe it." And I think that probably it sums up the period of her life, which is just in utter shock and disbelief that this thing that she's worked for is gone now. It's just taken away from you.
2012, she was inducted into the Tennis Hall of Fame. 2015, there were rumors of a comeback that did not come to fruition. Bush, I think the Coco Gauff story and what we talked about in terms of the weight of expectations, you saw kind of what happens when someone fails to meet them in Jennifer Capriati. But realistically, I'm not sure if those expectations were set at a proper height, because at the end of the day, this is a 3-time Grand Slam champion, a former world #1, someone who literally came all the way back after being put in an impossible situation as a teenager. She went through it all. She went through the tennis obstacle course that we've seen play out so many times, where you have all these combinations of the overbearing parent, the isolation, the no schooling, the complete just altering of a normal life in search of this goal. And we saw it play out with Capriati. I mean, there was negatives, of course. I mean, there's addiction to painkillers after the shoulder surgery. There's trouble with the law involving an ex-boyfriend. Like, I think Cap's life, like, you see all of the good and the bad kind of rolled into one.
Totally, you do. And I think she is an embodiment in some capacity of, there's a war going on, I think, I was going to say a cultural war, but that's not really what it is. In terms of people who recognize systemic problems or systemic failures versus people who put it down to individual fault, I think there are parts of this that you have to look at and say, okay, yeah, she messed up, right? But mostly you can understand systemically about how someone ends up in this scenario. Just everything that gets put upon her, the scenario that she grew up in. And I mentioned the example at the start about, can you imagine a 13 or 14-year-old that you know in your life and then chuck $4 million, $5 million on top of them and then make them do every interview under the sun? Why are we asking these people to do this? And I think really that's the thing that I would come back to in this, which is I'm glad that Coco Gauff has good family around her, and it doesn't seem like they're trying to, for lack of better terms, exploit her for money, because that really does not seem like that is the case with her family at all. But goodness me, we can see the effects of what that does. And it really, really badly affected Jennifer Capriati. And I think she's a telling tale to those who came afterwards. And I think that's very true, right? The Williams sisters do come after this. And Richard Williams is quoted saying, "I don't want my daughters to turn into the next Jennifer Capriati." And I think every single female player who came after this have been quoted saying something similar. different phenoms come along and recognize that what was thrown at Jennifer Capriati, they don't want them thrown at their daughters or at their sons. And I think, as sad as it is, that may be a legacy that she leaves behind, which is that this is something that we shouldn't ask of our young players anymore.
I found it interesting in that ESPN documentary, Bush, that we watched, that the majority of the people interviewed reckoned that it was Capriati's individual problems and her fault that led to her demise, and did not cite the tennis system. And I think that in itself is the problem. When it was produced, and if that was okay to say, apparently it was. I think everyone believed that it was Cap herself who put herself in that situation, when clearly, when we can look at it in hindsight and many years later, we literally see the same thing happening still. There is a systemic problem, and it's up to the people involved in the game if they want to be a part of the solution or keep enjoying the ride. Because I think you have to be blind not to see it. Bush, anything else before we wrap up? Before we pack it in for the day?
Yeah, two other things, just briefly touching upon it. You mentioned that Justine Henin went on to win this title in 2003 against Kim Clijsters. Yeah, she did that off the back of 5 hours sleep as well, and an IV drip.
She had an IV drip.
Absolutely. She had an IV drip, she had 5 hours sleep, and she absolutely annihilated Kim Clijsters in the final, just to prove how good she was. It's an unbelievable story that really doesn't get talked about a whole lot. And then one last thing just to touch upon. The commentator in this match, I finally figured out where I think he is a resemblance from. So, in school where there's like a principal or a headmaster or, someone in charge, and it's like a sports day or it's a track and field meet, and it's the first time that the headmaster takes the microphone. Are you having a good day, everyone? That's what I think he sounds like. I finally figured it out.
Jeez. Just bury this guy. We gotta find him. We should have found out his name before we bury him like this. But no, hey, I'm here for it. Take that, man. Take that, U.S. Open commentator. Okay, that was the 2003 U.S. Open women's semifinal, an all-timer between Justine Henin and Jennifer Capriati. We are on Twitter at OpenEraPod. We're on Patreon /OpenEra, $3 a month. Helps us keep making these shows. It would be a big help for us, so please donate if you can. And give us a rating or a review wherever you download your podcasts. As always, thanks to a producer extraordinaire, Dylan Wilson, on the ones and twos. For Simon and myself, thank you for listening to the Open Era podcast. We'll talk to you soon.